Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and it's time to finish what we started. This is the rest of the Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah Atomic Roast. As the plot continues, we learn that the time travelers have issued an ultimatum to Japan. Either use the futuristic computers they provide, or be destroyed by King Ghidorah. Naturally, these computers are just a way for the Earth Union to control Japan, and the government figures that out pretty quickly. So, with only two options on the table, they decide to make a third of their own.
That dinosaur is buried under the ocean. Do you think we could somehow change it into Godzilla?
Hey, you remember that thing that never existed? Let's make it exist again. Seriously, I know I already spoke about this in part 1, but it baffles me that this movie doesn't seem to understand its own concept. How do people still remember Godzilla? Even if we eliminate the grandfather paradox from this equation, it still remains that the only people who should remember Godzilla are the ones who went back in time to erase him. Unless they completely failed and they didn't erase him at all. But we'll get to that later. Anyway, the plan is to find the dinosaur and nuke it, thus making it Godzilla once again for the first time. This, of course, is assuming that the wounded dinosaur who's been at the bottom of the ocean for the last 50 years is still alive, but it's not like they have any better options. But wait, despite a self-defense force which contains laser cannons and Super X flying machines, Japan has no nuclear capabilities. So how are they going to enact this plan?
We have a nuclear submarine with powerful nuclear missiles. We've always kept this totally secret.
Oh, well, that's convenient. Wait, what?
Don't worry. Of course, we haven't kept this submarine in Japanese waters. She's in a country not too far away from us.
You have a privately owned submarine armed with nuclear weapons and you've been hiding it in another nation's territory?
The submarine was only for protection in case Japan was ever attacked.
A starving man in the desert wouldn't swallow that crap! This businessman just randomly decided one day to build a military-grade sub bristling with nukes on the off chance that Japan might get attacked. And I'm assuming he means by another nation because he never saw fit to call this in against a kaiju. That in itself is pretty paranoid. But then, instead of just keeping it in a hidden Japanese harbor, he sent it off somewhere else to hide and wait for trouble. You know, keeping a gun in your house in case you get robbed, that's one thing. Loading that gun and hiding in your neighbor's bushes while you wait for someone to approach the house, that's something else entirely. And I don't care if it's fortunate this sub exists to enact this harebrained plan, because that's not what it was initially built for. Nor do I care that he used to be a soldier, because he's not a soldier anymore. He's a civilian, and any civilian that makes his own military-grade weapons, especially nuclear missiles, should be on a terrorism watch list. Either way, the government doesn't seem to have any other options if they want Godzilla back. Except Miki is sensing that Godzilla already is back, slowly swimming through the ocean towards Japan. So Terasawa does some digging through the archives and discovers that the dinosaur was teleported to a spot where a nuclear submarine disappeared years ago. I think the implication is that this is the actual origin of Godzilla, and all the time travelers did was ensure that it happened as the timeline originally said. Except there are some sources which say the submarine went missing in the 70s, and we know for a fact that the original 1954 movie still happened in the timeline thanks to the later movies. So somebody is wrong. I just don't know who. Besides, this only raises a new question. If Terasawa learned this and wrote it down in the book, why didn't the time travelers know about it? I know they said the book didn't sell, but the time travelers still had it, so they should have known. Unless they didn't read it and all they did was look at the pictures. I honestly wouldn't be surprised. One of these days I'm trying one of her recipes. I've done it! I prevented the assassination of JFK! It's about friggin' time. You left back in part 1. Actually, are you sure it worked? Because I just watched a documentary about the assassination yesterday. Oh, I promise you it happened. I sent the parade on a nice safe route through Dealey Plaza.
Why don't you check your databanks and make sure?
Alright, we'll see what you know. You see, it says right here that the president was killed while driving through D.O.
This had better be the only thing you've screwed up, pal.
Well, that depends. What happened to the Hindenburg?
Blew up in 1936.
I'll just go back to my own time and stay there. Forever.
What an idiot.
Terasawa and Emmy go driving to somewhere, only to be pursued by M11 in a chase that brings the Terminator comparison full circle. Look at these shots, it's like they're not even trying to hide it. To be fair, it's not as blatant as the next movie where they have an Indiana Jones reference for no reason other than to just be a reference. We'll be getting to that one eventually. This time, though, the robot isn't out to kill, but simply to take Emmy back to the ship, meaning this whole thing could have been avoided if they just stopped the car. Elsewhere, the privately owned nuclear sub, no, I am not letting that go, is destroyed by an already mutated Godzilla, which is good because no such weapon should be in the hands of a civilian. While that's happening, Emmy reprograms M11 to serve her instead of those evil, nasty foreigners, and there's a brief battle between King Ghidorah and some fighter jets. There are really only two things worth noting about this fight. First, this is the only part where the kaiju-centered special effects really falter, as the King Ghidorah model is constantly changing size in relation to the jet models, as well as hardly moving. Second is this line.
I'm spitting!
Bear in mind, that moment has no context in the scene itself, but the line delivery is just hilarious. Kinda like this line.
Reptilicus sighted in shallow water.
Ah, the classics. But now that Godzilla is back, that means it's time for the titular brawl. First and foremost, the King of the Monsters makes his grand entrance. Okay, that was an odd musical choice. I generally don't associate the soulful tunes of Harpo Marx with the menace of Godzilla. Oh well, whatever. He's back and he's bigger than ever after getting an extra dose of radiation from Shindo's private arsenal. So we get our fight, and, well, it's pretty good. I mean, these are always the highlight of every movie, but this time around, the director seems more interested in watching Terasawa, Emmy, and M11 sabotaging the time machine and supercomputers with bombs.
Go ahead! Make my day.
Terasawa, please do not try to be cool by quoting better movies. That line had about as much context as a Family Guy joke. So our heroes finally have the upper hand. Or do they?
Do you think that means you've won? We don't need a computer or King Ghidorah to do our work. Godzilla's going to destroy the country of Japan himself. This new Godzilla is unfriendly, and he's going to destroy your country.
He was never friendly in the Heisei timeline. Actually, sorry, I interrupted. Keep going.
There's something you didn't know. Our ship has an advanced safety device. In the event of any emergency, it sends us back to our own time. 20 minutes after the alarm goes off, it sends us on our way.
You bastard!
Wait. Emmy's the one who didn't know that? Wouldn't that be like one of the first things you learn when you're training for time travel? Ugh, just when I thought her character couldn't get any worse. I'm sick of this. Let's get back to the monster fight. Given how powerful King Ghidorah is, I'm sure he's giving Godzilla a real run for his money. Or maybe this version of King Ghidorah's a wuss. That's also possible. Determined not to let those evil, horrible Americans get away with changing the future, our heroes depart in the smaller time machine and teleport the giant saucer right into Godzilla's path, where he proceeds to blast it with his heat ray before finishing off King Ghidorah, sending his golden corpse plummeting into the sea. But indeed, Godzilla isn't content to have trounced King Ghidorah, and proceeds to continue stomping around Japan, leaving untold destruction in his wake.
I'm afraid this is no longer work for ordinary civilians. Please, excuse me.
Yes, pardon me while I pee my pants and run away. I'll be locked in a closet with my teddy bear if anyone needs me. During Godzilla's rampage, which I admit is well done, we get a moment where he comes face to face with Shindo, and the two appear to remember each other.
How will this touching reunion play out?
I have never forgotten your sacrifice for us. Hey, you left me to die alone in the jungle, you son of a whore! So, obviously we know Japan has no weapon to defeat Godzilla, so our heroes come up with a brilliant idea. Emmy can return to the future and use her advanced technology to revive King Ghidorah and bring him back to fight on humanity's side.
But how do they know the carcass will still be there in the 23rd century?
King Ghidorah should be well preserved. See what is called.
Come again?
King Ghidorah should be well preserved. See what is called.
That is one of the dumbest lines I have ever heard in a movie.
First of all, the only way cold can slow decomposition to the point you're talking about is by way of freezing.
Even if it's the made-up science that kept Captain America preserved after World War II, you're still talking about freezing something.
Ghidorah is in the water off the coast of Japan, which is pretty close to the equator and thus fairly warm as far as the ocean is concerned, so freezing isn't going to happen.
Second, there are all kinds of scavengers in the ocean just waiting for a buffet the size of King Ghidorah to drop into their laps.
A blue whale in the middle of the Pacific who dies at the surface of the water will have had its bones picked completely clean by scavengers before it's even sunk halfway to the bottom. Third, even if scavengers avoid this particular carcass because it's radioactive, there are still all kinds of bacteria and coral polyps who will ensure there's nothing left of King Ghidorah long before the 23rd century arrives.
And before any of you accuse me of nitpicking a minor scientific detail in a movie with time travel and radioactive monsters, I would like to remind you that those fantastical elements do not affect how the water works. That's like saying the X-Men series has mutants in it, therefore the sky is red and green striped instead of blue. What's the connection? There isn't one. This line is stupid.
So Emmy returns to the future, which is also the beginning of the movie, which I guess means she actually went to the past. Here we learn that apparently Godzilla really has destroyed Japan in the interim.
Hang on, that makes no sense. We established we're dealing with a stable time loop, remember?
The dinosaur was transported to just the right location where it became Godzilla anyway, meaning nothing about the timeline was altered. Now suddenly the very thing Wilson, Glenn, Chico, and Emmy were lying about before turns out to have come true?
Which is it, movie? Can history be altered or not? And how do you know going back this time will do anything? Good Lord! How is it possible for a single 103-minute long movie to have more plot holes and paradoxes than the entirety of Doctor Who?
Godzilla enters Tokyo, and right on cue, Emmy arrives piloting Mecha King Ghidorah, aka the kaiju that confused a generation of American fans.
See, back in the mid-90s, Trendmasters released a line of Godzilla action figures in America, but based them on the Heisei movies, which at the time, very few of us actually knew about.
We were mildly confused by the designs for Rodan and Mechagodzilla, but Mecha King Ghidorah came completely out of left field for us. Don't even get me started on when they brought in kaiju like Batra and Biollante. Anyway, we get our second battle, which again is good, but it's mostly restricted to this single area.
I get the reason why. The idea is to contain Godzilla, so of course they try to keep him in this spot. But the fight winds up feeling a bit underwhelming as a result.
Actually, the real reason is because the Mecha Ghidorah suit was so heavy it couldn't be supported by an actor inside, so it had to be done entirely with wires, hence why it doesn't walk around. Make do with what you've got, I guess. After a brief fake-out defeat, Emmy activates Mecha King Ghidorah's Godzilla grip to carry Godzilla out of Japan. Okay, look at this. You can see how this will go horribly wrong, can't you? Godzilla, the fire-breathing monster, is still conscious and facing his opponent as he's carried away.
Emmy, you deserve exactly what's about to happen. Yep, saw that coming a mile away.
Don't worry though, because Emmy is alright. See? She reappears in a bad effect shot.
Thank you very much, Emmy.
I have to live 200 years. Just so I can see you again.
Oh, alright, you got me, movie. That line was pretty sweet.
Terasawa, there's something I never got a chance to tell you. We're related.
And now it's disgusting. You just had to include some incest in there, didn't you?
Having thus made me feel dirty, Emmy goes back to the future confident that she has saved Japan from Godzilla's wrath, even though the last thing we see is Godzilla still up and about before we fade to the credits, meaning nothing was actually accomplished at all.
And that was Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Why do people call this one their favorite again?
I've already gone on at length about the rather disturbing nationalism that permeates this movie, and yes, it is a big deal. Even if I assume it was completely unintentional, it's still there, and it is indicative of a very real societal issue.
But even if we put all of that stuff to the side, what remains may not be as disturbing, but it's still really bad.
Emmy is one of the most horribly written characters in the history of fiction. Too many elements are ripped straight from the Terminator movies without doing anything interesting with them. The special effects are good one minute and laughable the next. And most condemning of all, the plot revolves around time travel, yet has no understanding of how time travel works. I still own the DVD because I'm a Godzilla fan and thus have no choice. But even so, I can say Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is one of my least favorite Godzilla movies. Maybe not the absolute worst, but definitely in the bottom 5.
Well, that was depressing. My first time reviewing an original Japanese Godzilla movie on this channel, and all I did was tear it to shreds. I've got to fix that. I think next time we should visit the Millennium branch of the Godzilla franchise. Yeah, I think that's just what we'll do. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer, signing off. Now, of course, the original time travel story, H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, also had some pretty disturbing content in it. But we'll discuss that another day.